Man, shows like Pimp My Ride really had some ugly car interiors. From Dragon Ball Z inspired orange and blue to one with a hot tub, and let's not forget the CAT scan. However, all this was in the name of wild television. So my question is, what are some of the worst factory car interiors ever made? And yes, this video is mostly my opinion. There's no statistical evidence here. Basically, we're gonna be taking a look at some of the weirdest steering wheels, center consoles, dashboards, and design choices. So for today's laid back video, let's get into it. Huge thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring today's video. Opera GX is on a mission to get people to break up with boring browsers. Think Chrome, Safari, etc. And to also have fun while doing it. The message is very simple. Opera GX is not for everyone. But if you game, it's time to break up with those other browsers. The best way I could kind of compare Opera GX is like fine-tuning a car. You can completely fine-tune Opera GX's resource usage, ensuring that every click, tab, and stream hits peak performance. So say goodbye to lag and say hello to the digital ride that feels smooth and powerful. Now, Opera GX keeps your system running at peak performance even with your browser open. And with GX Control, the panel lets you limit the amount of CPU, RAM, and internet bandwidth you are willing to let your browser use. I'm mostly into car culture due to the ability that customizing and modifying a car kind of lets you express yourself like a piece of art, except I'm not very good at painting. But that's why I love that Opera GX has more customization than any other browser. And they bring it to a whole new level with new and improved features and GX mods. So what are GX mods? GX mods are the kind of the equivalent of, say, a custom body kit or a custom paint job. What's really cool is that none of these are limited. You can go into the fine details and pick different options from each mod that you've installed to truly make your browser your own, like changing the splash screen when you open Opera GX, keyboard sounds, background music, wallpapers. And if you want to change things up, you can disable and enable these individual modifications in the mods menu sidebar. So definitely make sure to head to the GX store to find something that suits you. And also, starting off with Opera GX is an absolute breeze. You can quickly import all your settings from a previous browser, like browsing history, bookmarks, and cookies. And it's also compatible with any Google Chrome extension. Once again, huge thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring today's video, and use the link down below to download Opera GX today. Link down in the description below. Thank you, Opera GX, for supporting this video. Okay, so here's the rules. 1, it's my opinion, like I said. 2 is that I have either driven in these interiors or experienced these interiors in person. So this isn't something like me reacting to photos and being like, man, that's pretty terrible. This is me actually having an intimate time with these interiors and being like, wow, this is really bad. And a lot of these experiences were off camera, but I sure do remember them. So if there's a really bad car interior that you've experienced, go ahead and put it down in the comment section below. And at the same time, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit that like button. It very much helps me out in YouTube's wonderful, not punishing at all, algorithmic world. So thank you so much for hitting the like button, and let's get started. Okay, so number 1, let's just get it out of the way. The Pontiac Aztek. You know, the Walter White spec mobile. Now, if you didn't know, the Aztek's designer would later go on to help design the C7 Corvette, one of the greatest sports cars ever built. It's just funny how some people just have to pay their dues sometimes to move on to the really cool stuff. It's like being an opening band of the headliner and nobody cares about you. And you're just like, we're here for that other band, not you. That's the Aztek to the Corvette. Speaking of Corvettes, let's talk about the steering wheel on the Pontiac Aztek. It's a victim of the 4-spoke problem. I really don't think really anybody has pulled off a nice looking 4-spoke steering wheel. But these big chunky 4-spoke wheels, I just think they look awful. My brain always goes straight to cheap GM 2000s interiors. That's what this steering wheel does to my brain. Going back to the Corvette, even the C5 had this wheel. The automatic shifter is aimed towards the driver, and it just looks and feels like it's on its last leg. I'm also not crazy about the whole two-tone dashboard a lot of domestic companies were doing at this time. One half was black, one half was gray. It's like they couldn't make up their mind on anything with designing this car. Just a hodgepodge of ideas all glued together with no real direction. The pattern on the seats with it going onto the armrest, it's just so chaotic. And also the center console looks like it wouldn't even last 6 months. And of course, don't you love the oh crap handle for this very high intense, high horsepower car? Amazing stuff here. 2 is the Dodge Avenger. Okay, this one sits close to home, and it's personal. In 2012, I was in a very on-off long-distance relationship. What could possibly go wrong? And I hadn't even started making car content yet. But my ex had a family gathering in Amelia Island, Florida. So I flew down. Everything went well. I met her entire family for the very first time, but everybody was very tired from the road trip and everything else that they took, so I offered to drive everybody home. So my ex's mother's car was a Dodge Avenger. These roots go deep. I drove it down the highway, and it was the very first time I ever started critiquing a car like a car reviewer. I literally had the thought for the very first time, what a piece of junk. The gauges looked like they were straight out of a low pixel N64 game. Dash was creaking. The shifter made a horrendous noise and also had that stupid jagged pattern that Dodge was doing during that era. The shifter would actually hit the plastics on the sides of that stupid pattern. The steering wheel was worn out even though it wasn't that old of a car. The speakers on the dorm had this like piece of chrome around it that was popping out with the music going. Little did I know that this moment in time would seal my destiny as a car reviewer and shape my life forever. And when I flew back home, she ghosted me and broke up with me for another dude. Guess you could say it wasn't meant to be with the family that had a Dodge Avenger. Next is the Nissan Quest. The Nissan Quest, if you don't know, is a minivan. And minivans sometimes have very strange interiors to get the proportions right. Massive windshield, massive dashboard. And it's not easy to make an attractive minivan dashboard. But Nissan had a board meeting in their design studio and said, let's just make the center console a table or the air purifier your girlfriend or wife wants from Target. Like a lot of minivans, the shifter is very high up, kind of next to the driver, but it's on top of the pedestal that just looks like a tub of plastic. Like you can hear this photo, the creaks. The gauges are on top of the dashboard, which I'm absolutely certain was never ever victim of glare. And the gauges looked like they were printed on construction paper. Steering wheel had those notorious long buttons or switches that always liked to, snap or break or get stuck. You find them a lot in some of the other cars that Nissan made at the time. It also had some very weird colors for each spec of the Nissan Quest. One was so gray that it didn't even look like they bothered changing the plastic's color after manufacturing, or like the inside of a hospital. And the other was this weird tannish brown, which just looks like a big fat coffee stain everywhere. It just looks like a car that when you got in would smell like smoke and broken dreams with some exhaust leak somewhere under the minivan. But hey, it probably gets you around, and oh, look at that, it's VQ powered. So you get to sound like a trombone all the way down the street in your Nissan Quest with your very strange interior. Speaking of the Aztek, like we talked about earlier, next is the Hummer H2. The Hummer H2 was a big deal when it came out because the Humvees had this really cool reputation of like, oh wow, it can climb up a vertical wall and it's super capable and it's America, it's the military. Fun fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger had the first Hummer H1 ever that was ever made for a civilian anyway. But the H2, with its big comeback, the interior had much to be desired. Very similar to the Aztek in a way that it just couldn't pick a theme. I truly think they should have just leaned into it and made it fully a minimalistic military grade interior. Simple, not a lot going on. It's like they couldn't commit to the minimalism because they knew they were gonna charge a pretty hefty fee for this vehicle. These cars were not cheap in pricing Anyway, maybe the interior was pretty cheap, but I digress. And the buttons are a quick breeze away from snapping off. And the shifter is so obnoxious because it looks like a jetliner with the throttle on a plane. Very dramatic. It's also the biggest offender with the 4-spoke steering wheel. I think it might be the ugliest 4-spoke I've ever seen in my life. Like, what was wrong with just doing a basic, normal 3-spoke steering wheel for a simplistic, big vehicle? I don't know. Just another example of overpricing for cheap interior, in my opinion. The next one is a very weird entry for me because I don't find it ugly. I actually like it, but it's not for everybody. It's the Subaru XT, a steering wheel that teaches geometry lessons of right angles. Yes, when the steering wheel is straight, it just does a right angle like this. So I know a lot of people who think it's heinous and hideous inside, but I was on the side of it. It kind of looks kind of cool. It's got a digital dashboard that's way ahead of the time. It's not the first digital dash ever, but it was pretty early on. The shifter is truly something. It's literally a fighter pilot style joystick with no H pattern visible. It's kind of like the ball shifter on a Volvo, but integrated into the dash. I know we talked about the Hummer going full military, but this thing felt even more military from the 80s. The design is obviously supposed to feel ultra futuristic for the time. So this one's more of a victim of aging rather than just bad design choices, in my opinion. It's just dated, but I think it's neat. The last ones we're gonna mention today are all sort of related because they all come from the same company. The Dodge Caliber, the Chrysler Crossfire, and the Chrysler Sebring. The Caliber isn't super ugly inside, it's just insultingly cheap. I still need to review a Caliber SRT4 though. Sorry, I still haven't gotten around to that. Make no mistake, it's not a good looking interior. The two-tone is absolutely atrocious though. The white cream center console with the bright white gauges. I don't know why Chrysler loved these bright white gauges. It just made it look so cheap. Very Dodge Avenger. And the stupid shifter pattern, again, God, it's horrible. The interior just had no character whatsoever. It's like the lowest tier rental car you'd get in 2008. That's what it feels like. Same with like the Chevy Spark. Honorable mention. Terrible. But then we get to the Crossfire. What absolutely destroys the Crossfire's interior is the bright chrome center console. It's easy to stain, it's easy to scratch, and it just feels so out of place. I note the Crossfire SRT6 was really fun to drive because it was basically a Mercedes, but the rest of the interior is just okay. But it's just sad because the main thing that sticks out from me driving that car was not the sounds it made or the sights, it was that center console. Because the roof line is so low and you sit very low in the Crossfire, your peripheral vision just sees this thing the entire time. I just think about being in a SpongeBob episode of everything is chrome in the future. And then there's the Chrysler Sebring. Man, what a car. What a car the Sebring was. I actually knew somebody who had a early generation Chrysler Sebring. It was the convertible version, but the small triangle window in the back that you'd have to put down, it would get stuck. So they nicknamed it Shark Fin. So you're driving around town with just a shark fin on one side. It looks so stupid, but apparently it was a notorious problem. But they also fell victim to the 4-spoke wheel and some really terrible specs and design choices. Like this tan one that had a random piece of wood trim on top of the steering wheel. Why? It's so funny when you Google Chrysler Sebring interior, one of the top searches is seat covers. I wonder why. Side note, I came across this photo of a Chrysler Sebring with a Chrysler 300 front end. Found it kind of interesting. Anyways, those are just some of the OEM interiors I found pretty heinous and pretty bad over the years. What are some that you have experienced over the years? Put it down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. And on that note, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching.